Dragons and Unicorns present Making the Red Queen's Wand. You will need red lycra, medium weight wadding, gemstone glue, polythene tubing, flat back pearls, flat back clear, red and AB crystals, red thread, white bridal looping and a set of waterproof or outdoor use lights. You'll also need a base heart shape, a 12-inch or 30-centimetre ruler, fabric marking pens, fabric scissors, paper cutting scissors, small embroidery scissors, a zigzag stitch sewing machine, pins and hand sewing needles. This is the picture that the client gave me as the basis for the style of her Queen of Hearts or Red Queen costume that I'm making. And this is the image of the wand I want to imitate. I have a brief from the client that this needs to be bright enough to show up in the dark, as she's wearing it at Sudeley Castle's Spectacle of Light in December 2018. And so I'm adding both lights and crystals to the original design. I love customers who want bling. Obviously the Red Queen's wand, I need to start with heart shape, and I've begun with this pan, which is my heart cooking pan. Nice little cake tin, good shape. Now if you've seen my making a crown base, you'll know this fabric here, which is the paper mache that I use. This is actually too heavy and too large. Now I cut the basic shape using the cake pan and then coloured it up in different ways so that the customer could take a look at it. We decided that actually this wand is too heavy because she has to carry it around for 2 or 3 hours. It's also too large, so we've decided to make it from something different and also to cut it down. So what I'm going to do now is show you how to cut that down. We wanted to cut this down to about 3/4 of the shape that it is now, so I'm going to measure it, and the centre line is 9 inches and the top centre works out at about 11.5 inches. So there's about 2.5 inch difference between the centre of the heart and the top of the heart. So what I'm going to do is try cutting this down to the centre line to 8 inches. So I'll mark that and cut the oval shape down to about 9.5 inches, which will give me that line there. So I'm now going to draw a curve, and again use whatever you've got in the cupboard. This is one of the bases of my small 4-inch baking pans, so I'm going to use that and draw around and just straighten that up a little bit. Go to the other side, measure the line across, mark the centre of the top of the heart and take that to the edge as I've done over here. Draw that and then bring that into the centre again. I hope you can see that shape. So now I'm going to cut that with my paper scissors. As you can see, one side of the heart is slightly bigger than the other side, and it's this side of the heart that I like. So I'm going to use the nice sparkly side, and all I'm going to do to get a perfect heart is to cut a straight line down the centre. I've drawn that line, and now use that line as a guide, and now I have my perfect heart shape. As you can see, I've got a little bit of a lip here, so I'm just going to trim that off until it's nice and level, and then I can use this to make the template for the actual wand. For the wand, I'm going to use a piece of pipe about so big. Now, it does have to have lights in it, and so I'm going to use this to put the lights tubing. And these are my little lights. You can find them on a famous auction site. Just look up battery LED lights, nice and simple, and you'll find plenty of them out there. So those lights are going to be pulled through that tube. The battery pack is going to be down here, and the lights themselves will go through this tube. So that will need actually cutting down at a later stage once I've finally got the shapes that I want. And then this piece of PVC polythene tubing I can then use to make the holder for the wand so that there's a larger grip there. It also gives me a little bit more padding to go through, because the wand itself, instead of being one solid piece from this, I'm actually going to make it from fabric, and I'm going to use wadding, which is a medium weight. Now this is traditionally used for quilting and comes in about 60 inches wide. I also need some red lycra to actually make the outside of it, of the wand, and then I'm going to use some stick-on pearls and some stick-on crystals. So now I'm going to cut my basic shape and see how it goes. I picked up my polythene tubing from my local DIY store, and I have to remember when I'm making this heart wand that I need this to go up the centre. So I'm going to have to add the width of the polythene tubing to the heart itself, and this is going to be initially going to have the webbing on it. I will need to chop the polythene tubing to the approximate length that I want it to be, and I need to allow, as I said, for the lights to come out of the top. So I need to recut the size of my heart. So using a piece of A4 paper and measuring the width of my polythene tubing with my small guide rule, as you can see, it's about an inch wide. So I need to add an inch to the centre of that heart to allow for the wadding to go around it, but I need half an inch to go on the inside edge Otherwise, if I put an inch on there, it's not going to fit because it's going to be 2 inches wide instead of 1 inch wide. So I put my heart piece on a piece of paper. I also need to remember that when I'm making this, I need to allow a little bit for the bounce of the fabric, and I will also need to recut it for the shape of the red lycra, which is going to need to be wider because it's going to make like a fabric cover over the wadding. I will need to keep the wadding slightly stiffer as well, so we'll come to that later on. Putting my heart down on the paper and marking a 1/2 inch extra onto the edge. So top and bottom I need a 1/2 inch, and then I'm going to draw around my template exactly that size. Now obviously when I put this onto the wadding, it's going to make it slightly larger, but I'm not too concerned about perfection at this moment. I just want to get the basic shape. I can always trim the wadding down at a later stage if I need to. So now I'm going to cut my 1/2 heart with the extra allowance for my polythene tubing out of my paper. So having cut my wadding template, I've now marked it as such, and I can use this as often as I need to. I've cut my wadding because I'm not quite sure how many layers of this wadding I'm going to actually need. So I'm going to start with 4 squares, and they measure about 12 inches by about 12 inches. So they're not particularly square, but it's a heart shape. So as that's the wider top, I can use that side to fold in half, put my template down, and using a permanent marker, I can then mark my shape onto the wadding, just roughly. I don't want it too dark. You can possibly not quite see that, so I'm going to mark that in a different colour. And then darken it up. You can possibly see the line there. So now I'm going to use my fabric scissors and cut the shape out. Remember, we've got the wadding folded in half. And as always, you can remember that you can cut this down once it's actually put on the polythene tubing. So we have this shape, and I've got my polythene tube. I'm just going to sit it onto the polythene tube. I'm quite happy with that. It's a good size, and when it's supported, it's going to be a nice shape. It wants to be slightly padded, and it also needs supporting with some wire around the edge, because it's got to stand up to wear and tear when it's in use. So I'm going to cut some more wadding squares, and then I will stick them together. So I've cut my wadding into 4 separate pieces, and I'm just going to check and show you just how adding a couple of layers of wadding is actually beginning to support itself. There we go. Now obviously they need sticking together, and I want them also to be waterproof because they're going to have the lights inside as well. So for those of you who've seen my crown base, you'll be familiar with this stuff, which is called gallery glass, and I bought this again on the auction site, and you can actually buy it direct from the States. If you happen to live in the States, you can buy it from a company called Plaid, P-L-A-I-D, and that's called gallery glass. But you want the clear bottles, large bottles, not small bottles. The small bottles are quite expensive. These are much cheaper when you buy them in the bigger sizes. Okay, so I put some of that into my little paint tin, and I'm going to split my pear and paint the gallery glass over the top of one piece. And as you can see, I've now painted it completely, and it's all over the first piece of heart. So I'm going to place the second piece of wadding on top and just gently press it together, turn it up the other way so that the excess gallery glass is then going on to the other piece. Now I could use an ordinary glue, a rubberized glue, something like that, but I tend to like the way that gallery glass actually allows whatever I'm using to flex once I've used it. And having glued the 4 pieces together, I'm now going to leave these overnight to dry, and we'll come back tomorrow and go for the next stage. And we're back, and as you can see, they're both nice and dry, still nice and flexible. And I've had my husband, I don't like using saws, I've had my husband cut my polythene pipe down so that it will fit quite happily in between and be able to be held. Now it's still a little bit long, but I need to actually make the piece before I decide just exactly how long I need it. So having done that, I've taken a piece of my lovely red lycra and I've cut it to about 23 inches or 58 centimetres, 580, just over 580 millimetres, and just under the metre, or 36 inches. So having cut that piece, I'm going to fold it in half and place my 2 pieces of stuffing underneath. Now that gives me an approximate size, And using my Lycra template, I've made a nice little template here and cut it into a size that will be more than big enough to go over the wadding. As you can see, that is way too big. So hence the little lines, the little dots I put in here, and you have the little dots, and I can trim that down as much as I want. So I've cut a piece like that, and I've cut 2 pieces. So what I'm going to do is just show you how I made all the lines. And what I did was take my piece of Lycra. Now I did this right way up because I did it yesterday and totally forgot to video, so I thought, okay, I'll do it today. So as you can see, it's about the right size. It's been trimmed down just a little bit because I need all the extra. And as you can see, I've already put crystals on this piece. This is one side, and I've used clear crystals and AB crystals, which give it a nice sparkle. And then on the other side, because I wanted 2 looks, so that people who are standing behind my customer can see a different view to those standing in front of her, and she can always turn it round and reverse the wand whichever way round she wants to use it. This piece has clear and red crystals. I hope you can see the red crystals on this, but it looks really, really pretty. So what I did, obviously with the right side facing, I took my Lycra template and took out that centre tube that we'd marked, this piece here. So I cut it down and I put it down on fabric, and using my fabric marker, remember I did this on the right side, I placed the line all the way round. Did it fairly roughly, didn't worry too much, and then once I'd got it done, I straightened it up, straightened out all those nasty edges, and then did exactly the same on the other side. Now I know that that is just about the size of the wadding, so I need to move the heart shape inside. So I took my little guide rule. I really would recommend one of these. They're absolutely brilliant. They're 6 inches or 15 centimeters long, and it does mean that you've got a guide. So taking again my fabric marker, I've used an inch in because I think that's an ideal size for what I'm looking for. I can always go and put another row of crystals outside the one that I'm putting on to give it even more bling, or put another one inside. So I marked an inch in all the way round, as you can see, and just kept marking it, and then drew my line by joining those dots, drew my line all the way round. So having drawn my lines all the way round, I think you may be able to see my outside line here, although it's not very dark. Now the reason I've used the fabric marker is so that I can wash it and it will come off nice and easy. So I've marked all those lines, and in order to show you how I've done it, I keep my crystals in an old cold straw tub, really, really handy. Flat back crystals, great. Then I can use the lid and if I knock them off or spill them, they're still in. I only have to pick up a couple of dozen rather than the whole pot, which has got thousands in. So I've got a spare piece of the lycra here, and I've got my gem tack glue, which is there, and this is the one I use. It's made in the USA. There are plenty of flat back crystal glues available. I believe the most popular one in the States is E6000. Take a look on eBay, but make sure that they're waterproof, because otherwise when you do have to wash your costume, they're going to fall off and you're going to have to sit and re-stick your crystals. So, having drawn my lines, I'll just do this very quickly. I've got my lines I need, I've got my crystals, and as I say, when I did the previous one, I used clear and AB and clear and red, but the combination is entirely up to you. So I put my gem tack glue just a little at a time. Saves me worrying about it if I drop the plate on the floor or whatever. Now there are several ways of attaching the crystals. You can use the end of a cotton wool bud and just pull all the cotton wool off, pop it in, and that will give you, as you can see when you compare the size of the flat back and the size of the Q-tip, that flat back is larger than the end of the Q-tip. However, I have dropped this several times. It sticks to the floor. It's not really good. But what I do tend to use is an old paintbrush. As you can see, this one's a very fine one, and I use the end so that I can dip it gently into the glue, and where I want my crystal to be, press down, add a little more glue if I need to, and once you've done half a dozen of these, then you tend to find that the glue does build up, so you need to dip it into the glue less and less. I use my tweezers, and you get the odd one that doesn't want to be picked up by the tweezers, so you can always use your fingers, but you will get glue on your fingers. So I put it between the tweezers, held it nice and firmly, press down, and I usually have another paintbrush, which is quite handy to be able to just move the crystal around. Now on 99% of fabrics, the glue will actually go transparent, disappear, and any excess glue that you've got on there is simply going to disappear into the fabric. It does show, as you can see, on the back of the fabric, but that's not important. So then I'll take my next piece, and because I'm working on a heart shape and I wanted to keep this fairly even, whatever line you're working on, if you actually work from the centre of what you're working on outwards, you can keep the different coloured crystals accurate. When you get to the bottom, you need to do a little bit of tweaking, but obviously if you're doing a small piece and you don't need to be quite so accurate because you're not using alternating colours, then that's fine. You just push it down, use the back of the unglued paintbrush to put it on, And there you can see I've started. Now I forgot to mention I've put a piece of clear plastic down onto my work surface because the glue will actually seep through the fabric and you don't want to spoil your table. It does rub off eventually, but it can take a little bit of whatever you've got on the table with it, and that's not a good look. So as you can see, nice and simple. Once you've got more than a dozen beads or crystals on the piece of work that you're doing, leave it still and move it around. Right, don't pick it up because you'll break the tension between the fabric, the glue and the crystal, and then they start to slide around. If you have to, if you really have to move the fabric or pick it up at any point, leave it for 5 minutes, go away, have a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, whatever, and come back to it, because the glue begins to set after about 5 minutes and it makes it so much easier. And so now we have our lovely crystal heart and we're ready for the next stage on the wand, which I'll do tomorrow. And the crystals have had actually 3 days to dry because I needed to do a few other bits and pieces. So what I've done here is got all the pieces together. So I've got the back, the front, and the 4 pieces of wadding that we glued together. So those are now a pair. Now I'm not going to put the polypropylene wand in the center of it because I don't need to, because this is going to be very gently sewn. So I'm going to mark out by putting, first of all, one piece of the already crystalled fabric lycra down and place on top approximately the 2 pieces of wadding, and then I'm going to put the other piece roughly on top as well. Now I know I have to allow down at the bottom end and at the top for the wand to go all the way through, and that's because we're going to put lights around the edge of the heart wand. So they're going to look really, really pretty, and I'm not quite sure whether they're going on the inside or on the outside, but I do need them to be removable so that the lady who's wearing the costume can actually change the lights for red ones if she wishes to. So there's a variety of options within this costume, which is what we want. So I'm going to use, in order to be able to put the lights on and off the costume, I'm going to use Bridal Looping. Yeah, and all we need to do is feed the lights in and out of the looping once it's been sewn onto the wand. However, I'm not sure if I want to use black or white. The black is going to disappear into the dark, but it also takes a lot of the light away from the actual diodes. So looking here, it's not quite what I'm looking for. I can see already that the light is being dulled down and the black is actually absorbing the light. So what I've also got is some white bridal looping. Now, although the loops will actually show, because this edge, this curly edge, will be sewn in and hopefully hidden in the inside the seam, I can see that the light is obviously much brighter and it's going to show in the dark much easier. The reflection off the white is gives a much better colour and shade. So I think I'll be using the white after all. Now obviously I need to find out where I'm going to place that around the wand. So I need to make sure that the shape that I put originally on the crystals is actually fitting exactly onto the wand. Now that looks really, really good. So what I'm going to do when I get my pins, oops, back in a sec, which are very, very fine. I'm not sure you'll even be able to, there we go. If I put it against my hair, you can just see it. So nice fine pins, and I'm going to pin through the wadding down almost into the next level in just a couple of spots. So I'm going to use the tips of the hearts, the centre point at the top, and the centre point at the bottom. Now I don't actually want these pins to A, mark the fabric, and B, go all the way through to the lycra on the other side. I just want to make sure that this is held together. I'm just going to put another couple of pins in, just about halfway down each side. Press them in. As you can see, it's already beginning to make marks in it. So that's keeping that together. And then what I'm going to do is take the wadding and the 2 layers of lycra, pick it up and flip it over. Okay, now as you can see, this is definitely not on shape, because if I press down onto the pins, I can feel them, but I know they're not in the correct place. So what I'm going to do now is readjust the shape of these crystals, trying to ensure that the center point is going to pass through the wand, because that will notice. Okay, so I've got my pins there. Now I know there's a pin there because I can feel it, so I'm quite happy with that. I'm just going to shift it over slightly, and then I've found my other pin, and okay, my pins are almost where I want them to be, but they will twist very slightly, so I can't rely 100% on the pins. I have to also rely on the marks that I've made previously coming to the centre. Okay, now I'm quite happy with that. So what I'm going to do is unravel this, and then putting my hand underneath and using again my bridal pins, I'm just going to pin very, very lightly. I don't want to actually get it on the point of the I don't want it tight, is what I'm saying, because I have got to allow for the extra puff, if you will, of the centre of the wand. B, I've got to make sure that the measurement is equal all the way round, because I know the original pattern was equal. So I'm going to pin that side and then just twist slightly and pin on the other side, picking up the fabric underneath. So once I've got, I'm going to put a pin in the bottom, and I'm going to put a pin in the top. Now this will tell me roughly how much. Yes, I know I shouldn't put pins in my mouth. I'm a very naughty girl, as my granddaughter is very fond of telling me. Okay, so I put a pin at the top, a pin at the bottom, and a pin on both sides. That will give me an approximate measurement all the way round of where the lines, the sewing lines will actually be. So I'm going to turn that over and double check where my original lines are sitting within the wadding. I'm quite happy with that. That's not too bad at all. It may be slightly off, but because I know the hearts already traced are in a perfect heart, I can always trim a little bit of the wadding to fit the shape that I want. What I need here is a measurement that I can actually use as my sewing line. So what I'm going to do now is turn these over, and I can already tell it's not quite right, but using my small size ruler that has a marker on it, I'm now going to go from the crystals and measure to the pin. So on this side it's 2.5 inches, allowing for the drop. Down here, that's just under 2.5 inches, which is not a bad measurement. Over here, it's under the 2.5 inches, but if I stretch it, it will be. Now obviously I want a little bit of stretch on this because I need that 3D-ish look, but I don't want too much stretch, because if I've got too much stretch, the fabric will stress and then it will start to break down, and that's not a look I want. So if I measure up here 2.5 inches, that actually gives me way more than I need. So I'm going to drop that measurement down to 2 inches and just put a mark with a pin into the fabric. So I'll drop that back to 2 inches from the crystals. And then when I mark the fabric, I know if I mark it at 2 inches, it will probably fit quite well. So I'll check this measurement over here. Now again, that measurement is 2.5 inches. So this tells me that the wadding is slightly in the wrong place. That's not a problem, because the wadding can always be trimmed down to the shape that I'm going to have for the heart itself. But what I need to remember is those measurements have to be correct on both sides in order that I get the wand sitting in the centre, and then when it's being held, I'll just hold it there, you can see it's beginning to become solid. When it's being held, when it looks upright on that side, it also needs to look just exactly the same on the other side. Okay, so that's why I need to make sure that these measurements are correct. So what I'm going to do now is take all my pins out, because I know my measurement needs to be 2 inches. So I'll just remove all the pins, and I'm going to use my fabric marker and my small ruler to mark the 2 inches all the way round, oops, from the edge of both sets of crystals. Now I'm going to mark that on the wrong side, because if I mark it on the wrong side, and I put wrong sides together to stitch it together, it's all going to be correct. So what I will do is come back to you in about half an hour when I've finished making all those marks and connected the dots. So as you can see, I've now marked 2 inches from the edge, and I've cut 3 inches from the edge, which is why it took me a bit longer than half an hour just to check and double check my measurements. So what I'm going to do now is pin these 2 pieces right sides together, and just double check that they'll fit quite happily over the wadding. So I'll be back in a moment. So now I've pinned these 2 sides together. I've pinned outside the 2-inch line purely because, as I say, too many pinholes and you'll start to spoil the fabric. So I'm going to turn it right sides out, and I have to remember, apart from trying not to stab myself, I have to remember that there is also an edge in there that will be trimmed down. But it's just so that I can double check that the fit over the wadding is good before I actually make those stitches permanent. So I've now got my wadding and I'm putting it in. It's looking pretty good. Okay, it's looking good to me. It's not quite sitting properly, but I wouldn't expect it to anyway, because A, I've got the pins in there, as you can see, and B, I've not got it pushed all the way. It's not supported by the wand itself, but that is pretty good for what I need. Now I can actually add some more padding to that just to fill it out a little more, but I do need to bring, I definitely need to bring that point in. As you can see, it's just not right. But I also need to allow for the polypropylene center, and this section here needs to be open so that when I put the lights through, imagine those as the string of lights, when I put the lights through, they're going to come out of the top at the center point, wind around, come around the stem, they're going to come around the stem, go up the other side and go back down into the center. So I need to be very careful with that. But yes, it does need a little more wadding. So what I'm going to do now is photograph it, send the photograph to the client for approval, and then I can actually get on and do my sewing. Okay, so having spoken to the client, we decided that one row of crystals and pearls wasn't enough. So this one, as you can probably see, has been pearled up, and this side also has pearls on the inner shape. So we've made the line of the crystals thicker and more effective, but I've also added, as you can see, the stitching on the back. I've also added the line of the holder, the bridal looping, for the lights, so that they will actually go in and out of the bridal looping and just give it a very, very pretty look. Now, it does seem a bit silly to have the loops on the inside, but what's happening when we turn it, the loops will actually be sitting between the two surfaces, so that when I turn this, stitch it together and turn it inside out, you'll hardly see the loops at all. So you'll just see, it'll be better if I do that, you'll just see the edge of the loops, and by the time we've got the lights woven in and out of them, then they'll hardly notice at all. Now, to put the bridal looping on, there is this amazing stuff called Water-Soluble Tape. It comes like a double-sided sticky tape with a waxed paper, and you just cut it to the size that you need and place it around where you want the lining or zip or whatever you're putting in onto the edge. Then when you put it in the washing machine, after you've sewed the bridal looping down, you put it in the washing machine and it completely disappears and you can't see it at all. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just use some of this tape and put it down onto the facing, so you've then got an edge to run around the bridal looping so that I can sew the two together. So I'll take that back off. You can, it is replaceable, but only for one or two sections. Okay, so we've done that, and yesterday I got my husband just to cover this over. It's my polypropylene pipe, and all I've done is just put gold lame ribbon around it. So how I did this, I put double-sided sticky tape down the length, and then we wrapped from the top around in a loop, worked my way down, and then turned around, cut a piece off, turned it again, and that left us with a hole in between. And then Steve just turned it around, stuck another piece down, and went over the pieces that showed a gap. So now we've got this amazing look to the lovely pipe, ready to go inside a little bit poking out of the top there, which is what we want, so that we can put a crystal on there or glitter it up or whatever we decide to do in the end. And then, in order that the lights can be held, we've got the little battery box on the end. We also need to make sure that, because this is being used outside, these are waterproof, but I need to make sure that any water that does possibly get in there goes down through the bottom and drips out of the end. So I tried thinking of just attaching it to the end of the wand and putting the lights up through the centre. I tried it, it didn't work. So what I'm actually going to do is, I've cut a pair of hearts here. I'm going to edge them, turn it inside out, put a little bit of stuffing in there, and put the battery box inside. Oops. Put the battery box inside like that, so that it's hanging down, and then the lights will actually spiral up and around the heart. However, I've cut this a little bit small. There's not enough room to be able to close it, and once I've got the padding in there as well, it's not going to fit. So I tried making a slightly larger one. If I just do that, you'll be able to see the difference. That hasn't worked either, because I haven't lengthened the centre. So what I need to do now is lengthen that centre, and then I will use the same ribbon as I've used on here to put a little ribbon on the top, so that that can actually be attached to the cane and just hang either at the bottom or in the middle, wherever she'd like to put it for the costume. So we'll look at that later on. So I'm just going to stitch my two sections together and start to stuff them with the padding. Okay, and we're back. Now, having looked at the tape I've just recorded, it wasn't explained very well. So here's my spare piece of polyprop pipe, and I'm just going to push the end down inside, out of the way, and then I wound, attached it at the top, wound it around, that tape's losing its stick. Push that. That's better. That silly end there. Okay, so I wound just by having my thumb at the back, my finger at the front, and just literally wound the ribbon around. Okay, obviously kept it a little more even, but you get the idea, and then wound back up, obviously from the end, making sure that I'm crossing what I've already done. There we go. So you end up with still with a few holes And then what you do is wind the ribbon the other way and just cover up the holes until you get the stick finished. Now I've sealed the holes in the end, and all I did was use my magnificent gallery glass, soaked half of a wet one in there, pushed it down in and let it set. So both ends are completely finished and solid, but I've added very little weight to the tubing. Okay, so as you can see, I've used the original stitching line of the bridal tape as a guide, and I've simply gone round only part way because obviously I need to see how much clipping and notching I need to do on the excess fabric. I also need to check whether that's too much, because I've left it an inch there. If it's too much, I'll trim it down. So what we're going to do now is turn it the right way out. Just pull that through and turn. Now, because of the glue that I've used, I can be a little bit rough, but don't be too rough when you're handling anything that you've crystalled, because you will get the odd one fall off, which is why I always give my clients a few extra crystals. So we've got that turned nicely. Turn that on the other side and pull that out, and as you can see, my bridal looping is great, and the edging itself that holds the bridal loops in place, it's almost disappeared. If I wanted to make that a little more tight so that that piece of white edging is completely disappeared, I would actually probably go to the trouble of hand stitching it in, but I really don't need to do that. The extra white that's poking out here and there is also going to help the reflection for the lights, so that's why I'm going to leave that. Okay, so we've got the heart shape nicely done, and I'm just going to check how much clipping I need to do. Now, as you can see here, I definitely need to do a little bit of clipping because it's not pushing out properly. So I'll show you how to clip those curves in a moment. But what I need to do is check how much my heart is, my wadding is fitting my heart, and feed that in there. Give it a little movement, pushing around. By all means, pick up the end and give it a little shake. You can see how that's actually creating a better shape with the padding, and I'm quite pleased with that. I don't want this whole overstuffed cushion look. It needs to be subtle. It also needs to be light, as I said before, for the client, because she's got to carry it around all evening. So I've put that in. I'm quite happy with the way it is, and by the time I've actually clipped the curves, it will be fine. So what I'm going to do now is just push the poly pipe in through the centre and then pull it up through. Okay, let's just get my thumb in there. That's better. Thank goodness for lycra. I do love working with lycra. And pop that down there. Now, originally I was going to have a little bit of the red going down the handle. I can see now that I've put it together, that's not going to work. So once I've actually glued this in, and by this I mean the actual centre tubing, once I've glued that in, I'm going to hand stitch the edges, and then I'm going to trim this off and push it up inside and make a nice neat job of it. I don't want the wand itself to be too tall at the end, so I'm just going to pull that through until I'm happy, and that's 2 fingers. That's more than enough to be sitting out of the top. I can whack little children, that's why it's, and I can make my point. Off with his head! So I'm now going to mark that at 2 fingers, pull that through, mark it at 2 fingers, just use my chalk marker so that I know where to start my double-sided sticky tape. This is great stuff, love using this. Just going to check the length that I need. I don't want it going all the way down, so I'm just going to use that length, which, as you can see, goes from the top over the cushion and lands at the bottom of the crystals. So I'll now put the double-sided tape onto the piping, press it down, nice and firmly, and then cut another piece and put that on the other side. Now I need to be quite careful with this, simply because if I just put it on and then peel it off, as I insert it, it's going to stick to the wadding. So if I take all my paper off, it's going to stick to the wadding and I'm going to end up with a mess. Don't want that. So I'm going to push that through there because I need to have the centre of the heart turned in, and I need to be able to hand stitch that so that it's sitting around the wand nice and tight. I don't want this being flippy floppy. See how it's just falling down? That's not what I want. I want that to sit nicely. So having inserted it and got the length correct, I'm now going to open it up. You can see why I don't do all of the seam. I've only stitched halfway round. And the great thing about double-sided sticky tape is that once you start peeling the tape, 99 times out of 100, the rest of the tape will come off once you reach a certain point. So I'm just going to remove my sticky tape here, the backing of it. Yep, I've got the backing. Just double check that I've definitely got the tape on the wand, and then I'm going to keep that like that and just double check that that stays in place. Now suddenly my wand isn't sliding, my heart isn't sliding up and down the wand, it's sitting quite happily. It's sliding a little bit here, but I've only done one side, and I haven't stitched in tightly enough for this. Okay, so I'm now going to remove that second piece of sticky tape cover, double checking that I've got the sticky. Sometimes, you know how it is with double-sided sticky tape, it doesn't always come off as you want it to. So I'm just checking that that works, and then I'm going to pull that and it's stuck nicely to my heart and nicely to the wadding. Push that down, push the wadding up, and there we are. It's not moving. So once I've got it all sewn in, it'll be a nice little wand, and we'll have the heart at the bottom, just to make sure that the battery lights can go in there. Okay, so now I need to hand stitch all of this edge, keep it nice and neat and tidy, and I can almost see it finished. So there's my heart and the wadding, and what I need to do now is just clip the curves on the top of this so that I can then put it on and actually move around and attach the rest of it. I'm cutting off the base as I said I would, but not too far down. Measure twice, cut once. Okay, so I need to make sure that when I clip the curves, I clip them in the right direction. Now normally I would just fold that, take my scissors, and always protect your stitching with your fingernails. Put it there and cut a V out. Yep. And you end up with that shape. Okay, so you can see that. That's a nice simple way of doing it. Now, what I've got to remember when I get to here is that this will actually be folded down in once I've got the wand back in. So I need to be very careful where I'm cutting. So I'm not going to cut too far round. So I'm going to start cutting a thumb's width away from the centre. I can always cut that down, cut it and trim it a little bit afterwards. But if I just cut a V notch into the fabric, there we go. That's how you cut your V's. Now, if you've got the curve going the opposite way, so for instance, if you were actually clipping this side, you wouldn't make a V. Don't do the V's. All you need to do is to cut a straight line down from the edge. Again, make sure that you don't actually cut into your stitches, because if you cut into those stitches, when you turn it, I guarantee you it will open up and you will curse, because you probably have to remake it. So I'm just going to cut my straight lines. But as you can see, I'm not cutting all the way down to the stitching. because otherwise that would be a mistake. Okay, so that's ready, and I'll be back in a minute showing you the finished item. Okay, see you in a minute. Okay, so I've actually finished the Queen of Hearts wand, and I think it's looking pretty good. I do think I'd like to put something at the top here, just a bow or something, but I need to talk to the client about that before I do it. Go ahead and do it. I've put the lights in and out. You can possibly just see how the wire's woven in and out of Bridal Looping. I've made my little red heart at the bottom here and just tied it up. I haven't fully closed it yet because, again, I need to chat to the customer as to where she would like it, up at the top, down at the bottom. So that will be done on the day when I deliver the full costume. But I think this looks pretty good, particularly with the lights on. Look how lovely and sparkly that is. So I'm really, really pleased with this, and I think the customer will be as well, because we're looking for that reflectivity. So put down in the comments what you think of the build. Tell us how you feel about the red heart wand, and if there's anything you'd like me to have a go at building, pop it down in the comments and I'll see what I can do for you. Okay, thank you very much for watching. I hope you'll click like, share and subscribe. So we'll see you again on our next build. Take care, everybody. Blessings and light. What follows is a couple of close-up photos and a small video I made of my client in her finished complete outfit. I hope you love it as much as we, and the people who saw it live on the night obviously did. This is the front of the costume. This is the back. A side view. And I love the way the lights show through the costume itself.
I'll tell my costume maker she did work very hard on this. Very nice.
Is she?
Oh yeah. Weeks and weeks.
Weeks of gluing on crystals. About 1,000 of them. Give us a twirl, Chloe.
You should see the detail on this. At the back there's even stripes. And on the other side there's even got flowers. What are you doing? Welcome peasants to the Queen's Garden. We are the Queen of Hearts. You're very welcome to have your photo taken with us. But if you wish to pass us safely, girls should curtsy and boys should bow, at least try. Good, well done. That's good.
I'll never bow to you. Are you what?
Off with her head!
No.
Yeah.